All right. So the final measure we're going to talk about is once again, we're trying to measure violence in the lab, and what we're finding is that it's really hard to do ethically, right? So what this next one is, so we talked about the bug killing paradigm and how it's not the most valid measure to measure violence because it deals with bugs and how does intention work, and we made the claim that it's not equal to hurting a person, right? And so the next paradigm is the bungled paradigm. And this gets a little closer to what we want, but still not quite there. So the name of the paradigm is the bungled paradigm. And once again, it's trying to assess violence at a different angle. And so what's happening here is participants are told that they get to shoot a pellet gun. So it's like an air gun at another participant. So on the other end so think of it like a long hallway. And on the far side from you is going to be this other participant who is basically in almost like body armor. So the way it works is, have you guys ever seen those videos of like police officers or whatever training attack dogs? And how they train them is they put you in basically like a big foam cloth suit, so that way the dog can actually attack you, but it won't hurt you. Well, they're in that. So the other participants in that kind of setup. And you, as the participant, are told you get to shoot this air gun at someone. And what they did is they had guns of several intensity. And so you got to pick between gun 0 to gun 10. And each gun was, as you worked your way up from 0 to 10, was supposed to be more powerful. And in addition to what gun you pick, there's also the issue of the number of pumps. So the way an air gun works is it's powered by like air compression, so like CO2. And what happens is if you pump a gun once, it'll fire, the pellet will shoot. But if you pump a gun like 10 times, it'll shoot faster because there's more like air, there's more pressure in it. And so the violence here or aggression in this case, is going to be defined as the number of pumps you do times the gun choice you have. So let's say you pick gun number 3 and you pump it 3 times, your aggression score would be 9, which would be equal to if you pick the 9th gun and only pump it once. All right, and so that's the way this works. However, what happens is before they actually get to pull the trigger, the research assistant stops them and says, "Oh my gosh, you're in the wrong condition. I'm so sorry. Here, let's put all that away and let's finish up the study." So they call it the bungled procedure because the experiment gets bungled, right? Which means there was a mistake made. So no one ever gets to pull the trigger. And I think for safety reasons, if the original researchers didn't do this, I know others have. They actually pour a little bit of cement into the barrel of the gun, so that way, even if the trigger does get pulled, nothing actually ever comes out of it. All right. Now, this isn't terrible, right? Because now we're getting at actually violent behavior, at least close to it. And the question is, does this measure aggression? If aggression is defined as the intent to harm someone, we're getting closer. And obviously, by using a gun, you're now in the violence realm. But the question that I've always had, and this is why they did never have done this, is how come you didn't have the participants pull the actual trigger? Because then you could code, did they pull it, yes or no, in your data. Because you got to imagine that there is a huge, huge psychological difference between pointing a gun at someone versus pointing a gun at someone and pulling the trigger. All right. And even if you're a really good shot, right, there's a difference between like a kill shot or a warning shot or just a shot to wound them. So, like, are you going to shoot them? Like, if you're a really good shot, like not me, like if you shoot them in the foot, that's very psychologically different than shooting them at all, which is very psychologically different from like shooting them in the chest or the head, right? So I was always curious about why they never did this, and I actually was going to do something like that. But then, so this is in like 2006 or so, I was going to do something like this. But then all of a sudden, there was a mass string of like school shootings at the college level, at the high school level. And then the Sandy Hook thing came when I was here years later. And this just ethically, it's almost impossible to get even a fake gun through the IRB to have this on campus. Because then people are going to freak out. Oh my God, the person's got a gun. And it becomes a thing real quick. So I was never able to do that, but we're getting close, but we're not quite there. Like, pull that trigger, right? That's the one thing I would want to see. Put the cement in the barrel, pull the trigger, and that I think would be a measure of violence because you can code that. Like, even if you take 10, the 10th gun, the hardest one, and pump it 10 times, that's a score of 100. 10 times 10 is 100. multiply that by 7 or something like that if they pull the trigger. I don't know what you multiply it by, but you can get a massively different score if you pull the trigger than if you just say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable, I'm going to put the gun down, right? And I think that would be a good measure. That is where it needs to go. Right. So overall, what we've done is we've talked about measures of aggression and violence, and I want to make clear what I'm saying with all this is that we have to deal with face validity issues. There's typically always another partner that's a confederate or a fake partner. You have to do that because of the aggression definition. You have to find a way to cause harm to someone. You saw the CRT or the Taylor aggression paradigm. You saw that example, and you also saw the hot sauce paradigm. There are others as well. But then when you move into the realm of measuring violence, now you get into a big problem. And in all honesty, there is no valid way to assess violence at the state level in the lab. There is a way to assess trait violence. So you can ask someone on a questionnaire on a scale of 0, meaning you've never done it, to, let's say, 7, you do it every day. How many times have you used a knife against someone? Like, I could ask that question, but that would be getting at, are you a violent person? Like a trait variable, not a state variable, right? So what we need to do now is move on to the field of aggression, and we need to figure out what predicts aggression. Like, how does aggression work? What processes are going through this? And the best one is going to be the general aggression model, at least the best in my opinion, is the general aggression model. I think this is by far the best theory that describes aggression. It was done by Anderson and Bushman, and it's complicated. And so what we're going to do for the remainder of these lessons on this unit is we're going to build the general aggression model. But first, let me show it to you. All right. The general aggression model has what's called a trait process or distal, and then the proximate or the state process. So this is the proximate model. Proximate, just so you know, means like right now. All right, it means right now. So here's the way this works. All right, so let's work through this model step by step. First, what we have is we have the person and the situation. This is how it starts. Remember what Kurt Lewin said at the very beginning, that your behavior is a function of both your personality and the environment. This is what we mean by that. So the person is your personality. It's the things that you bring to the lab with you. So you bring your attitudes. You bring your what scripts you have available. You bring your sex. Are you male or female? So whatever you bring to the lab, that's you. All right. So that's what that circle represents. The situation is going to be what's happening in the environment right now. So if you want to think about it, this is like trait and this is state. All right. Now this arrow here, so let me dink. This arrow here, see how this fuses together like that? That basically means an interaction. So the person by situation interaction, just like Kurt Lewin said, is going to influence what happens next. Okay. So those are called inputs, meaning that's what starts this thing. Routes is basically the routes to get to aggression. And basically what Anderson and Bushman said in their model is we have something called the present internal state. So these are the things that are inside of you that are likely to change as a function of the person by situation interaction. Okay. So in the internal state, we have three things. Affect just basically means your feelings. So anger, basically, it means your anger. Then we have arousal, so that's like heart rate, blood pressure, skin conductance, so how sweaty your palms get, things like that. And then we have cognition. And cognition is aggressive priming, just like you learned about for exam 1. Now, I'm going to tell you that because that the general aggression model consists of priming, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we build this thing, the priming unit from from the first exam, that's going to be topic 3, that's back on the table and it is testable again. I'm not going to test you on the Barge study, but you need to know the definitions in the process. So you need to know what schemas are and what scripts are and the 5 steps that go from schemas to behavior. Like, you need to know those things because they're going to be relevant. So what this says is, if you look once again at the arrow that I just erased, this thing here, with the person by situation, what's going to happen is it's going to tell us that who you are and the situation is going to influence these things. So let's pretend for a second that that the situation is a provoking one. Let's say in the lab I provoke you. What this is going to say is that provocation, if it's successful, should make you more angry. That's the affect. It should make you feel aroused. You should have an increase in your heart rate, and it's going to start to prime aggressive cognitions and aggressive scripts. All right. And that priming, the anger, and the arousal should be, after the provocation, should be more kind of prominent, if you will, if you're based on your personality. Like, let's say if you're high on trait aggression, or if you're a male. All right. Now here's what's going to happen. So once the situation occurs and the person, it's going to influence your present internal state. That's going to influence what's called appraisal and decision processes. So let me show you what those look like. Sorry, I have to discard that to make that small. And I know you guys have seen this before. Appraisal and decision processes are that. This thing, oh, okay, I guess we're not going to like that. That thing right there, this picture, right where my mouse is, it's not going to let me circle. You've seen this before. This is the appraisal and decision-making process that Anderson built for the attribution unit. That's now back on the table. All right. Once all these things happen, all right, then what's going to happen is here is the thoughtful and my goodness, sorry, make you big apparently. Here is the thoughtful and impulsive action that we talked about before. So let's go through one cycle of this thing. All right, one cycle. So what's going to happen is, let's say that you are at a crowded bar and someone provokes you. That is the situation right here. That provocation is going to make you angry, aroused, and or it's going to make you primed. That priming is going to go with your initial attribution. The initial attribution is that person's a jerk. The person who provoked you is a jerk. Then it's going to ask you, do you have the time, ability, and resources to rethink that attribution? If the answer is no, that's going to be an impulsive action, likely to be aggressive. And that aggression is going to lead us back to here. All right. If you do have, okay, so that's that. So let's start over. Now, let's say you're at this bar, someone pushes you. That's a situation that's going to influence your present internal state. That's going to influence your appraisal decision processes, specifically the initial attribution. You're going to say in that initial attribution, that person's a jerk. If you do have the resources available, but you're happy with that, impulsive action, it's going to be aggressive, and it's going to lead back to the social encounter. Once again, one more time. Someone provokes you in a bar. That's going to influence your present internal state. The 3 internal state variables are going to influence your immediate appraisal. That immediate appraisal is going to be, that person's a jerk. Let's say you do have the time and the motivation and the ability, and you're not happy with the idea that person's a jerk. You're going to engage in reappraisal processes. And as we already talked about, if reappraisal is successful, the thoughtful action will be non-aggressive. However, if the reappraisal is unsuccessful, it doesn't work, you can't figure out why the person provoked you, except for they're just a jerk, that's going to lead to rumination. Rumination is going to lead to a thoughtful, aggressive action. All right. Now, what's going to happen here is we have what's called a feedback loop. The feedback loop, as you can see, is it goes to here to the social encounter, which then goes back to here. The social encounter is what you do next. So if the person provoked you by, let's say, bumping into you, after you go through all this process, the social encounter then is you push them. And guess what that person's going to do? They're probably going to push you back harder. Guess what? That person pushing you back harder is the new situation. It's going to influence your internal state, which is going to influence your appraisal processes, likely lead to an impulsive action that's aggressive. Now, your new social encounter is going to be you punch them. All right, well, they get up from the punch, and then now all of a sudden they get a beer bottle and hit you in the head with it. Guess what? That's your new social encounter. Feeds back here into the situation. And it keeps going over and over and over again, round and round, until the aggression is done. Whether that means someone is knocked out, someone's dead, or someone breaks up the fight, who knows? But what's going to happen is this is going to cycle over and over again until it stops.